So good morning, everyone. We will be again continuing with our module 1 series. So we have seen some of the process concepts. We have seen the process has got 5 different states. The long-term scheduler chooses the process from the new state and bring it into the ready state. The short-term scheduler brings the process from the ready state to the running state. Now let us see in this how the process comes from the running to the waiting state. So these are the 4 conditions in which the process comes from the running to the waiting state. The first condition is input-output request. So whenever a process requires any input-output device, then the process is switched from the running to the waiting state. So the process will be going to the input-output device queue. We have already discussed different types of queues which are present in the system, like ready queue and input-output device queues. So the process will be going to the input-output queue. Once it has been allotted the input-output device and it completes its execution, then again the process will come back into the ready queue. Now here the actual or the physical shifting is not there. The PCBs which has got the addresses, the pointers, the addresses of those PCBs are changed to the particular queue or input-output queue or the ready queue, etc. Because every queue which is residing in our system has got its own address. So simply the pointers and the addresses of that PCB is changed. No physical swapping is actually being done of the processes. Okay, so this is the first condition. The second condition is when the time slice expires. So this also we have discussed that in case of multiple users or multiple processes, we allot a small time slice to every user, and as the time slice is completed of that particular process, then the CPU switches that process from running to back to the ready queue. Okay. The third condition is forking a child. So in Unix, there is a command known as fork. So when this fork is executed, then it initiates or it starts a new child. So till that child is being executed, the parent had to wait. So this is the third condition in which the process is switched from running to the waiting state. After the child complete its execution, then the parent is again go back to the ready queue for the next allotment of CPU. The fourth is waiting for an interrupt. So interrupt requires high attention, or interrupt is a high priority service. So it requires immediate attention from the CPU. So whatever process is being executed at that particular time, CPU temporarily suspends that process, executes the interrupt, and after completion of that interrupt, the process which is waiting for that interrupt again resumes back its execution. So this is the fourth condition in which the CPU will be switching the process from running to the waiting state. State. Now let us look at some of the terms which we will be frequently referring to while studying the CPU scheduling algorithms. The first one is CPU utilization. So our whole aim is to keep the CPU as well as the input-output device to its maximum utilization. That is as much as possible. And so the higher the CPU utilization, higher the efficiency of our system. Throughput is the number of processes that complete their execution per unit time interval. It means that let us say I've got 100 processes in one system, and that particular system one is completing 5 processes in 1 minute. Every 1 minute it completes 5 processes. And we have also got the second system, and the second system is also having 100 processes, but it completes 10 processes per unit time or per every minute. So we can say that the system 1 has got the throughput of 5 processes per minute, and the system 2 has got the throughput of 10 processes per minute. So obviously, the higher the throughput, the higher the efficiency of our system. So CPU utilization should be as high as possible. Throughput should be as high as possible. Now, third term is turnaround time. Turnaround time is the total time when the process first enters into our system, and then when it completes its execution and is get terminated, that is, it exits from our system. So the total time from the start till the end is known as turnaround time of that particular process. Obviously, turnaround time should be as less as possible. Waiting time is the amount of time a process has been waiting in the ready queue while waiting for the CPU. As we have already discussed, that whenever the process had to come into the running state, that is, whenever it requires a CPU, then first of all, the process had to be brought into the ready queue. So while waiting in the ready queue for the CPU, the amount of time which a process is waiting there is known as waiting time of that particular process. Obviously, waiting time should be as less as possible. Response time is the amount of time it takes from when a request was submitted until the first response is produced. And please note, it is not the output. We just want the first response. That is, let us say, for example, I have searched some websites in the Google, and then when we click that particular website, then the amount of time it takes to give the first response, that is, the website starts opening, the first response which we get from that website will be the response time. Obviously, if we are opening two websites and the one website takes 10 seconds to give the first response and the second website gives 1 minute to give the first response for starting start opening, then obviously the second website which is taking 1 minute, I will not be going back again to that website. The response time, the website which is taking less time to open up will be my better choice. So response time should be as less as possible, as small as possible. So in this term, we can see that CPU utilization and throughput should be as high as possible. Turnaround time, waiting time, and response time should be as small as possible. Now let us start with our first scheduling algorithm, which is FCFS scheduling algorithm, first come, first serve scheduling algorithm. Now let us assume that we have got three processes in our system, and they have arrived in this order: P1, P2, P3. All have arrived at time interval 0, but the sequence of arrival is P1, P2, and P3. The CPU burst time of process P1 is 27 unit time interval, process P2 is 2 unit time interval, and process P3 is 2 unit time interval. Now, for execution of these processes, we will be allotting the CPU on the first come, first serve basis based on this algorithm. So P1 has arrived first, so we will allot the CPU to the process P1 first. So from 0 to 27, because its burst time is 27, so the CPU will be allotted to the process P1 from 0 to 27 unit time interval. After 27 unit time interval, the process P2 will be allotted the CPU. It requires 2 unit time intervals, so from 27 to 29, P2 will complete its execution. And after 27, we will allot the CPU to the P3 process. And again, it also requires 2 unit time intervals, so from 29 to 31, process P3 will complete. Okay, so now let us calculate the waiting time of these processes. So here, the process P1 has arrived at time interval 0, and we have allotted the CPU at 0 time interval only. So it doesn't have to wait in the ready queue for the CPU. So its waiting time is 0. Process P2 has been allotted the CPU after 27 unit time interval. So the waiting time of P2 will be 27. And P3 has been allotted the CPU after 29 time unit interval. So waiting time of P3 is 29. Okay. So waiting time of P1 is 0, P2 is 27, P3 is 29. So average waiting time will be sum of these divided by 3, which is coming to be 18.66. Okay. Now, suppose the process arrives in the reverse order. It means P3 arrives first, then P2, then P1. All have arrived at the same time interval, that is 0 time interval, but the sequence of arrival is P3, P2, and P1. Now, as we already know, P1 is requiring 27 unit time interval, P2 and P3 both are requiring 2 unit time interval. So since P3 has arrived first, in sequence, so P3 will be allotted first the CPU. it requires 2 unit time intervals. So from 0 to 2, the P3 will be completing its execution. After that, from 2 to 4, P2 will be completing its execution, and from 4 to 31, P1 will be completing its execution. Now let us again calculate the waiting time. So here, the waiting time of P1 is, P1 has got the CPU after 4 unit time intervals, so its waiting time is 4. P2 has got the CPU after 2 unit time intervals, so its waiting time is 2. And P3 has got the CPU at 0 time interval, so its waiting time is 0. Again, we will calculate the average waiting time. It is coming to be equal to 2. Now let us again consider the previous example. Here the waiting time was 18.66, average waiting time was 18.66, and here the average waiting time is 2, drastically reduced. 9 times more we are requiring the waiting time in the previous case. Though the scenario is same, the CPU burst is same, the processes are same, only the arrival sequence has been changed. But this has decreased the efficiency of my system. As we have already discussed that waiting time, turnaround time, and the response time should be as small as possible for better efficiency of our system, right? So this effect is known as convoy effect. Now what this convoy effect is, let us look at this processes once again. So here we can see that process P1 CPU burst time is 27 unit time interval, while P2 and P3 both are requiring only 2 unit time interval. Okay, so this is obvious that P1 is a CPU bound process. CPU bound process have got more statements related to CPU, and they require more of a CPU time. And P2 and P3 are IO bound processes, right? Because their CPU burst time is very less. So when one CPU bound process and many or multiple IO bound processes are present in the ready queue, and CPU bound process is the first one to execute, then all the IO bound process, though they are requiring very less time of CPU, but they have to wait unnecessarily because of one CPU bound process which has got the large or high CPU burst. Okay, the amount of CPU burst requiring by P1 is large. So that is why the waiting time, average waiting time of my system has increased, right? Similar will be the case when all these processes P1, P2, and P3 will go to the input-output device. Now, since P1 is a CPU bound process, therefore its IO requirement will be very less. But P2 and P3 are IO bound process, so their IO requirement will be very high. So what will happen? If P2 and P3 are executed first in the IO device queue and P1 the last, then in that case, again, the system efficiency will decrease, or the average waiting time of the system will increase, right? So when one CPU bound and many IO bound processes are there, or when one IO bound and many CPU bound processes are there, then this kind of problem will arise. It means it will depend on the sequence of arrival of these processes, that how much waiting time the system will be requiring, right? So this kind of effect is visible only in this first FCFS scheduling algorithm, that is first come first serve scheduling algorithm, and this effect is known as convoy effect. Okay. Second property of FCFS is it is inherently non-preemptive in nature. Okay, so it is inherently non-preemptive in nature. Now, what do we mean by non-preemptive in nature? There are two schemes which we follow: preemptive and non-preemptive. Now, let us see this example. So, let us look at this example. There are two schemes, as we have discussed, as I was telling you, preemptive and non-preemptive. So look here that we have got three processes, P1, P2, and P3. Now, P1 has a time unit of 27 unit time interval. So once we have allotted the CPU to process P1, then we have not taken back the CPU from P1 till its complete execution of 27 unit time interval. That is, after 27 unit time interval, we have taken the CPU from P1 and then we have given it to P2. Okay. Similarly, P2 requires 2 unit time interval, so we have given the CPU to P2 from 27 till 29. And then we have taken back the CPU from P2 and then again given it back to the P3, right? So this kind of scheme in which we, once the CPU is allotted to any process, then the CPU is not taken back until and unless its CPU burst is completed. This kind of scheme is known as non-preemptive. So in first come first serve scheduling algorithm, it has got inherently non-preemptive. By default, it is non-preemptive in nature. It means once the CPU is allotted to any process, then we will not take back the CPU until and unless the complete CPU burst is exhausted of that particular process, right? In the upcoming algorithms, we will see that the CPU scheduling algorithms can adopt both the preemptive as well as the non-preemptive schemes. Okay, so FCFS has got only non-preemptive scheme, and that is why it is said to be inherently non-preemptive in nature. Okay, so that is all for this lecture. Thank you.